The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Kristy. Kristy, can you tell me where you were born? And if you can describe to me what it was like, where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. So now you're in the classroom.
Yeah, well, hello, Tim, and thank you for having me on the show. So I was born in a very small, quaint town in Missouri called Hannibal, very famous for Mark Twain, and, all things Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, Becky Thatcher. It was a wonderful, wonderful town to grow up in. We lived right on the riverfront. So being in and on the Mississippi River was my life as a child. My father, who was a Vietnam veteran, when he came home from Vietnam, he joined the Hannibal police force. So not only did I grow up in a wonderful small town full of wonder and literature rich and tourists, but I also, my dad being a police officer and my mom, working at some of the local tourist attractions and was a chef. It was a wonderful, wonderful place to grow up.
Wow. So you said it was quaint. Describe what the Quaint was. Was it like a little village like you see in England, or was it like you see on a film of sort of Huckleberry Finn?
Yes, it was like you would see on a film, Tim. It was if you can envision, and I know that Hannibal, Missouri is not now, 40 years later, what it was then. But growing up there, it was the kind of quaint that you see in movies and on television where you have, the ice cream shops and the mom and pop bookstores and the locally owned souvenir shops. And you can walk up and down the street of Hannibal and go in and out of stores. And there's a trolley that runs through the town. And there are bed and breakfasts that are sprinkled throughout the town. And, there's the caves that you can go in and explore, and the train tracks that kids used to love and go and explore the train tracks and be on the riverfront and ride on the riverboat. And so, yeah, it was very picturesque. It was very, somewhat Norman Rockwell. I just was there a few weeks ago and someone I was there with said, wow, it's amazing that people are still just walking up and down the main strip and going in and out of these shops and talking to one another. And you see a group of elderly men sitting in front of the coffee shop, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. So it really was a wonderful little town.
So your dad came back from Vietnam and he became a copper.
Yes.
Was he like the sheriff, or was he just a constable?
Just a police officer. He was not the captain or the sheriff, but he was on the police force for 30 years. And it was, good and bad being in a small town and having a father as a police officer. On one hand, you got away with a lot of stuff. And on the other hand, you got away with nothing because he was everywhere. So, yeah. The town's about 17,000 people, which is quite small. And everyone knows who you are. And so being in a town that small and being a father, that was such a public figure. And my grandmother actually drove the trolley for the Mark Twain dinette. So she was a tour guide for Hannibal and drove the trolley. At one point, I was also in the Miss Hannibal pageant and was crowned Miss Hannibal. So we have a lot of roots left in that town.
Wow. So, I mean, this is like a proper trolley bus. So
yes.
It went on tracks and
it did not go on. Okay. So it did not go on tracks, but it did look like a trolley bus and it just went on the street. But she would sit up front with her microphone and her little CB and walkie and tell everybody as she drove, as the driver drove through the town, she would talk about all of the sights and all of the, the tourist attractions and the history and all of those things. So that was quite fun to be a part of that sort of history of that town as well. And I actually believe they, in Hannibal in 1993, they had a massive flood that just took over the entire town. And of course, my father, being a police officer, had to be in a boat on patrol for many, many days, patrolling the town and trying to get people off their rooftops and trying to get people to safety from a rowboat, from a small little John boat. And so a lot of interesting things happened in that town when I was growing up.
Wow. Well, let's have a look at your schooling then. So, can you remember much about your kindergarten?
You know, I can. We lived right around the corner from our elementary school, and my brother and I, who was 2 years older than me, and we would walk to school every day, like most kids did. 50 years ago, we weren't having parents drop us off and things of that nature. We lived in neighborhoods where we had schools right in the neighborhood, and that's where the term neighborhood school comes from. All the kids walked, and kindergarten, I didn't love school, which is hard to believe, knowing where I ended up in my career. But it's a weird how that happened. But, I liked the social aspect of school. I loved making friends and playing at recess and being in the school classroom. But academics weren't always my strong suit. But yeah, I went to a very sweet elementary school, which just happened to go up for sale on the market. So they've torn a lot of that down at this point. My house no longer exists. They bulldozed that down in that town to build up new things. And then I went to a couple of different schools for elementary because we moved a few times. But it was a wonderful schooling, small town, small group of kids. So it's nice to have that to look back on.
So you moved a couple of times, so was that further away and go to a different school, so you have to make new friends? How did you get on with that?
Yeah, it was difficult in elementary school, and we moved, I think, maybe twice. But the good thing about that was, in such a small town, when you're growing up in a really small town, is eventually you all end up in the same junior high or middle school. When you get out of elementary school, you all come back together. And we had one junior high, which that's what it was called back then. It wasn't called middle school. We had a junior high school, and then we had one high school. So eventually we did all end up back together during my schooling. But each school that we attended, had its good points and its bad points. They were all within walking distance. So I wasn't a kid that rode the school bus every day. Or anything like that. We always were able to walk to and from school unless the weather was bad. And it would be kind of cute because my brother was older, so he had older friends. So I would always be that little girl who was tagging along behind my brother with his friends while they were saying, "Scram, kid, get out of here." Yeah.
I know that feeling, having
Uh-huh.
younger sisters.
Yeah.
Always hanging around like a bad smell.
Always.
So do you feel that you missed out not getting on the school bus? Or was you quite lucky because the school bus driver, because it's a big yellow bus and they've got a big handle where he opens the door and the driver looks scary, do you think, I ain't getting on with him today?
That's a really good question, Tim. And I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question. And now that I look back on it, I did not ever ride a school bus. And I don't think even when I went to junior high school, I rode a school bus, because at that point, my father or my mother were dropping me off, or I would ride with a friend. And my grandmother was a huge part of my life. And I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. She would take me to, get a donut in the morning, which, back in those days, it was like, oh, we're going to go get a glazed donut and a little pint of chocolate milk and have a donut in the morning with grandma. And then she would take me to school. But, I never thought about wondering if I missed out on riding a school bus. Maybe as an adult, I've ridden more school buses with my career than I did as a child. So I never rode a school bus as a kid. So I don't know if I missed out on that or not. I don't think so. I think the time that I spent with my family really made our relationship that much closer. And I have one son that now does ride the bus, and he loves it. He would prefer to ride the bus than for his mom to take him to school.
Yeah. Well, I guess, you wouldn't want your mum to take you to school every day.
No, especially when you're a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah, they get embarrassed, don't they, at that age?
Yeah, and I always make sure to say, "Bye, son, I love you," and blow kisses
Yeah.
out the window. So he's not big on that.
At the top of your voice, obviously. Come back and give me a kiss and a hug.
Yes, yes. You have to, right? That's our job as parents, is to embarrass our children as we were embarrassed.
Yeah. And then when you get grandkids, the top tip
Ooh.
there is give them lots of sweets and chocolates just
That's right.
before you hand them back.
And a drum set for Christmas.
Oh yeah.
That's my plan.
Yep. So let's move on to your junior high school then. So did you pick up on your academic studies by the time you got to junior high?
No, I didn't. I, I was always an average student. I was always a C student. My parents wouldn't allow anything less than that. So I did the bare minimum that I could to stay out of trouble. I was never an A student. I was never a straight A student. I might grab a B on occasion if I did really, went above and beyond because I really liked the class or I enjoyed the teacher. But I was such a social kid. I was involved in, the cheerleading clubs and the track team and things of that nature. So I had to keep my grades up academically in order to participate in the social clubs. And so in junior high, it was a lot of hanging with friends, running in the hallways, grouping up in the hallways, meeting up at the lockers with my girlfriends and our group of friends. And it really continued that way into high school. I think I barely graduated high school by the skin of my teeth, to be honest with you, as far as academics go.
So what was your worst subject? Which one did you just didn't want to get up in the morning and go to school? What one do you try and avoid?
That would definitely be math. That's probably a very common answer. I actually enjoy math now as an adult more than I do. I feel like I'm relearning math. I'm learning to love math as an adult because I'm learning things that I should have learned in junior high and I should have learned in high school, but I just either didn't care, didn't think it was important, didn't think I could do it, thought it was too hard, was scared of it. Now, as an adult, I find myself through my children learning and actually being interested in the process of math. But I truly was not, middle school and high school. I hated math, hated that class. And maybe Spanish was number 2. I wasn't big on Spanish. They forced us to take that. I wouldn't have picked that. They forced us.
So what was your best subject then? What did you sort of leap out of bed for and sort of rush to school to want to get into that particular class? Which one really did enthuse you?
Yeah, definitely reading, language arts and literature. I loved books. I love to read. I like to write. I've always liked to write. And so I did enjoy the process and the ability to go into literature class, go into reading class. And I don't know about you, but in our, when I was a kid, we always had that dog-eared book that we were reading on the corner of our desk with a bookmark in it. And the pages were all, sort of torn up a little bit. And the if you didn't have a bookmark, what would you do? You turn the flap of the page in so you could remember your page. And, I don't know if kids do that as much now because a lot of kids aren't reading paper books. They're reading everything online. But I always can remember some of my favorite books sitting on that corner of my desk or being in my desk, because we had desks where you actually put things inside your desk, whether the desk opened up, raised up at the top, or whether it was just open. I don't think they have desks like that really anymore either. And so, man, that always really sort of inspired me, having that chapter book or those favorite books sitting on the corner of my desk, just waiting for me to open up and read the next chapter.
So the next chapter, which was your favorite book? Which one did you read more than how many times did you read the favorite book?
Mm-hmm. I would say growing up, probably my favorite book was Island of the Blue Dolphins. And I read that book over and over and over. And I actually forced my children to listen to that book a couple of times. And so it was always one of my favorites. And, you know, I have the book in my library downstairs on the bookshelf. And I always had a love of Where the Red Fern Grows. That was another one of my most favorite books. And, you know, I don't know if those books are still as relevant today, but yeah, definitely favorite reads when I was a kid.
I say they made us do Animal Farm by George Orwell, and 1984. I was in the lowest of low, and I mean we didn't get the posh books. We didn't have to do Shakespeare, nothing like that.
Yeah, we didn't do a lot of that either. But I would be remiss to say that probably The Adventures of Tom Sawyer was one of my favorites. You know, they sort of forced that on us, being from Hannibal and having the history of Mark Twain and Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher and Huckleberry Finn. We were sort of, you know, destined to read those books on a daily basis there.
Was that part of the curriculum then for your particular area?
I don't know if it was actually part of the curriculum, but we were definitely reading them. Yeah, and whether that was because teachers just wanted us to read them or because the district was telling them they had to read them, you know, we always had those books at hand.
They were readily available then.
Yes, absolutely.
So, did you do any musical stuff? Did you have to play an instrument? Did you have a theatre class?
No, you know, I was never musically inclined. I do like to sing. I cannot sing, but I like to sing. I did take choir when I was, I think my first year of high school. I joined the choir and I enjoyed it. And, you know, the choir is a lot easier when you can't sing because your voice just combines in and drowns out with everybody else singing in the choir. So it was a good spot for me. But no, never played a musical instrument, really could barely ever read music. Just not something that I ever took on. I wish I would have. I think it would be great to be able to play a musical instrument, but I was in the choir for a year and I did really enjoy singing.
Yeah, I got thrown out of the choir.
For what?
Putting everybody else off. My problem is I can't even carry a tune in a bucket.
Oh, yeah. I might be a little bit better than that, but not much. I think I just sang quiet so they couldn't hear me as well.
Well, I like to sing loudly.
Oh, boy.
And it's always off key. I might hit the odd note now and then, but it'll probably be the wrong one.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So moving on then a little bit into your high school. This is junior high. So, and then you moved up to the high school. Was that a different school? Was it a different part of town?
Actually, our junior high and high school were right next to each other, but they were different buildings. But they were just basically one parking lot was the junior high, one was the high school. And the great thing about our high school was we were right across the street from McDonald's, Long John Silver's, Taco Bell. And so what that allowed us, some of us that, you know, weren't rule followers, on our break or on, you know, before school, after school, we would run across the highway, run across the road to McDonald's, you know, get something, come back over. And so, you know, we had the senior star in our high school, which was on the main level. Our high school was 2 stories. And on the main level was this big, giant star stamped into the tile. And so when we were seniors in my high school, nobody was allowed to walk over the senior star but seniors. And so, you know, going in as a freshman, we all made sure to like walk around the senior star because, you know, they'd make you do something silly like carry a pacifier around with you all day or a baby bottle or something very silly like that if a senior of the school caught you walking across the senior star. And so, you know, it's funny how we remember our high school days. And I remember that building being so much bigger than it actually is. Because for one of my high school reunions, we went back and we actually went into the school and it just seemed so small to me as an adult. But when I remember the school. It seems so big. And, and I think that's true of a lot of things when we go back and revisit our history or our childhood or places that we remembered. They always seem so much bigger than what they really truly are as you get older.
Yeah, I guess your childhood memories are different to your grown-up memories. You see things in a different light. You
Hmm.
remember stuff differently, and yeah, that's quite amusing.
Yeah.
And you say about a high school reunion. I don't. I've only ever been back to the school once, and that was 25 years after we'd left, and that was weird. That was
Yeah.
really weird. I mean,
Yes.
uh, I get it when I go to quite a lot of army reunions. We have a regimental gathering every year, and there's always somebody new that pops up that you haven't seen for 30 or 40 years. But I find that at these reunions is you're looking into the old face, and you can see the young one behind it,
Hmm.
and then you'll pick up on a conversation you had 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
and, I,
Well,
and I find
and
that's great fun.
and we actually did the same thing on my 25-year reunion. There was a large group of us that went back into the high school. And so yeah, being back in that space, but with the same people
Mm,
that you hadn't seen, right? I hadn't seen some of these people since we went to that school together. And so
yeah,
all these memories just came flooding back as we were walking through the halls and going out onto the football field and walking into the lunchroom and remembering exactly what table we sat at and remembering where we sat in the bleachers, because that's kind of like church, right? You always sit in the same
yeah,
spot in the school lunchroom and in the bleachers and things like that. And so, and even the church in my town that we were a member of, it's just, and I try to go back when I do visit Hannibal as an adult. I try to go back into the church, and my great grandmother actually founded our church and
mm,
was dug the very first shovel of dirt to build that church. And my parents got married in that church, and I sat in the third pew back with my grandmother every Sunday in that church. And so things like that hold a lot of meaning as an adult. And I try to embrace that with my children, that the town we now live in, they were all born and raised in this small town.
mm,
They're going to feel the same about this place that I feel about Hannibal as an adult. And so trying to see it through that perspective is very, very interesting.
yeah. Now, important question. When you went back on your reunion, did you walk across the senior star?
I'm sure I did. There were probably people running
Are you
across that
sure?
senior star.
You didn't walk round it?
No, I made it through that high school as a senior. I earned that.
So, graduation. Did you have a prom? And did you pass out with honours, or did you scrape scrape out
Scraped
college?
by. I did go to prom. And like I said, I was very social. I was involved in a lot of activities. And so yes, the homecoming dances and prom. I wasn't going to miss any of those football games. I barely scraped by graduation, but I did graduate and with my class. And so, what do they say now? D's get degrees.
Yeah.
So, so I made it. I made it.
So, what did you do after you graduated and your prom? Let's just go back. Your prom. Did you get the football jock take you to the prom, or did you get the spotty geeky youth?
That's a very good question. Well, we had a lot of football jocks, but no, I did not go with a football player. I went with another young man that I had just been dating that also went to the school there, but he was not a football player. So not the football jock for sure. But after graduation, I kind of just took a year or two. I wasn't the kid that decided as soon as I graduated, okay, I graduate in May or June, and now in August, I'm going to go to this school or I'm going to go into this career. It sort of took me a year or two after prom, after graduation to really figure out and decide what I wanted to do, because I really didn't know. I had no clue. And so I loved the town so much. I was extremely close with my parents and my grandmother. And so I was not in any hurry to up and leave. I really wasn't.
So what did you do? Did you become a tour guide for the town? Did you take over from your grandmother on the bus, on the trolley bus?
I didn't, but that would have been really fun. I should have done that. You know, now that I look back, Tim, I think I should have done a lot of more things than what I did. Should have ridden a school bus. I should have been a tour guide. No, you know, I went to that had a very small, it wasn't even a university when I graduated. It was called just the college, Hannibal LaGrange College. And it was only a 2-year school. And I went there for a while trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and thought maybe I would have some great epiphany of a job or a career that I wanted. And during that time, I did start working in a school as a substitute teacher. And that's really what led my passion and desire to be an educator, a teacher, as my career. And so at that point, I did go to a 4-year university and went into education.
Aha. So you did like 2 years at this one, did a bit of sort of teaching assistant, and you thought, that's what I'm going to do.
I knew that's what I needed to do.
And then you went off to college for 4 years.
Yep.
So what was your major?
My major was elementary education, which is grades kindergarten through 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I received my bachelor's degree in that area. And then not long after, 2 years later, I went back to school, to graduate school, and received a master's degree in educational administration. And then I went back to school after that and received my educational specialist degree, which is another 2-year degree after your master's. So I've done a lot in the world of education. And I actually went from not liking school, the academics, to loving school so much that I just kept going back and going back. And I just stopped going back to school about 5 years ago. And I don't really think there's anything else I can go back to school for at this point.
Oh, you never stop learning. Every
Right.
day's a school day.
Yeah, that's very true.
You learn something new every day.
Every
Whether
day.
you go and do it academically or whatever, but there's a lesson to learn every day. Trust me.
Yeah.
So, let's explore that second bit of the 4 years. So, elementary. So you didn't want to do senior school, so you went for little kids.
Yes.
Any particular reason for that?
You know, I've always had a sort of a passion for smaller, younger children, and especially children that maybe come from undesirable homes, low socioeconomic homes, kids that struggle, maybe because I struggled when I was in school academically. And I really wanted kids to like school enough that they wanted to learn in school. And I'm a big hugger of kids, relationships, love on them. And that's a little harder to do with the older kids. You know, the older students have already sort of developed into a potentially who they're going to be. And with the younger children, you have that opportunity to really impact them and help mold them and build their character and be that soft support for them at ages 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 years old. And so I always worked with younger children. Now I would work with older children now. I have older children in my home and been around long enough that I could definitely understand and could work with middle school children or high school kids. But I really do love the younger kids.
Who was it said that you give me the boy at 7 and I'll give you the man at 18?
Mm-hmm.
Who was that?
I don't know, but it's very, very true.
It's a
famous,
yeah. Well, somebody like that. It was somebody really important in the academic world. He said, "You give me the the child at 7 and I'll give you the grown up.
Yeah. And my husband and I were just talking about this because my children, my students that I taught the very first year of my teaching career after I got out of college are all now married. I've been at several of their weddings. And one of my second grade students that I had my very first year just had his first child with his wife. And so I have really stayed in touch over the years with that first group of children. So when I first had them, they were 7 and now they're almost 30. And it's amazing to see how they have turned out and what kind of adults that they've turned into be. And no matter how much time I spend with them as adults, I still look at them and see that little 7-year-old kid sitting in my desk, getting their pencils out and sharpened. And, they're grown adults having children. So it's really fascinating to see that turnover in their lives as they get older and mature. And I've been to many college graduations. I've been to their high school graduations. And so it just shows you it's such an impact on your life when you can be with kids at that age and that they still come back and want you to be a part of their life.
I guess you didn't go for any corporal punishment then.
Oh, no.
You didn't need the stick.
Didn't he? A couple of kids probably could have used it, but I didn't. I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't able to do that. Corporal punishment was a real thing when I was a kid. My brother, I think, had to paddle a few times by the principal of our elementary school. He was no stranger to the paddle. And I think that was normal when I was a child, right? Being called to the principal's office and getting paddled. And that would be unheard of today.
Oh, you'd been caught before you could blink.
Right.
Yeah. I was no stranger to the cane either.
Mm-hmm. Did they hit you on the knuckles?
No. You either got it across the backside or you got it across the palm of your hand. And depends on the severity. But the first time I got the cane, I went home and complained to the old man that I'd been beaten at school. He said, you probably deserved it. Here, have another one. So he took his belt off and gave me another in. I didn't complain again, but I just took the punishment at school. And one thing it did teach you is don't get caught in the first place.
That's right. Don't get caught.
So we got wiser.
Now, I never got the paddle. Just for a record, my brother did quite often. I did not. I knew when to stop and not take it to the next level to get the paddle.
Yep. Don't push it that extra mile.
That's right.
That extra yard.
That's right. Times have changed, haven't they?
They have, unfortunately. I mean, yeah, there's some places you'd like to see a bit of that sort of discipline in schools.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the problem because we've had a few generations now that haven't had that level of discipline. And I think it's starting to show in the attitude of kids today that they can get away with absolute murder. And there's no consequences for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, they can not only get away with it, but their parents will support them in it a lot of times. Yeah. And you know what the scariest phrase was? When I was a child in grade school in a small town, the scariest thing a teacher could have said to me was, I'm going to call your parents.
Yeah.
Because I knew when I got home that no matter if the teacher was wrong or right, my parents were going to 100% support the teacher, and I was going to get punished double without even a question being asked. And now I've been in situations in my career where a teacher will tell a child, I'm going to call your mom. And the student will say, well, that's fine. Here's her number. I'll call her for you. And then the mom will come up and support the child and be angry at the teacher. So it has just really flipped from.
Just wrong. That is just wrong. But I mean, I can't see any way around it unless they change the law and allow a little bit, just a little bit of that corporal punishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not capital punishment, a little bit of corporal
Right.
punishment. Yeah,
Just a little. Just a little.
Just a little. Just that threat. Just that little bit of a threat that there's a consequence.
Yes. Just a little fear.
Yeah, just that instill that little bit of fear into
Mm-hmm.
the child and give them that little bit of respect.
Right.
I mean, you learn that sort of respect on the sports field, particularly on the rugby field. You don't backchat the referee on a rugby
Mm-hmm.
pitch, because you do, you're going to find yourself sat on the bench for 10 minutes at least.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they need to introduce that into football or soccer,
Mm-hmm.
because that there's the way that soccer players just abuse the referees is just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you backchat the referee, you get to sit on the sidelines for 10 minutes. And I think if they introduce that, the first few games, you're going to have quite a few teams sat on the benches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and we could say that's true of any position of authority. You know, folks are really just challenging authority across the board, whether that's referees or teachers or police officers or store managers or whoever that may be. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we need a little bit of that consequence in there still.
So let's move on then. So you've been in and out of education, and you've been a teacher. So what's been the most satisfying part of being a teacher that you have loved? What's driven you to be totally inspired, and what's been a single moment that's really stands out?
You know, I think I love when kids learn, and I think all teachers will say that. When kids learn, and when kids not only learn, but when they really, really spark something, when you see something change inside them right before your eyes, whether it is a student that comes from a very chaotic, abusive household and they're kind of angry and defiant, and they're a behavior issue in the classroom, and they're in trouble all of the time. Getting to the core and the heart of that child and just working on them and chipping away at that hard exterior and really investing in why they act the way that they act. And then when you get to it, when you finally get to that core of that kid and all those walls come down and their behavior soften and they realize that they can be vulnerable with you, seeing them sort of turn that corner. And I've seen that a lot in young kids that I've worked with that come in from difficult homes, or kids that are coming from homes where the mom is working 3 jobs, or the lights were turned off, or they're helping take care of siblings, or they're not sleeping at night, or they're not eating.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.